make sure we're all on the same page. Most everybody here knows this better than I do, but let's just go down on history. The first person that we know in modern times that reported on Izapa was 1938, Carl Rupert of the Carnegie Institution. He visited Izapa. But there was another individual who was a local school teacher in the Tapachula area by the name of C.A. Culebro. He published a small pamphlet on Stella 5. And if anybody can find that pamphlet, there's a lot of people that are interested in that pamphlet. Nobody can find that pamphlet. But he was the first one that we know that published something on that. Then in 1939, a year later, there was a little piece that was published in the Archaeology Atlas of the Republic of Mexico about Izapa. So in 38 and 39, there was a couple of things published about Izapa. In 1941, Matthew Sterling here was a well-known archaeologist, was on an Olmec dig down in Mexico. And one of his colleagues kept telling him about this something going on in Izapa, this stone that was laying on its back down there that was really quite interesting. Matthew's curiosity got piqued, and so what he did, he took his crew, or that crew right there, that's a photo of them on horseback. It took them 7 days to get from their Olmec dig down to Izapa. And this is what he found when he got there. This is Sterling's photograph of the Stella, what's called the Stella 5 stone now. It was laying on its back. This photograph was not taken straight on. It skewed just a little bit, but that's the first photograph of Izapa. And this is what got everything started and got the interest going in Izapa. Now, in 1956, Gareth Lowe with the New World Archaeology Foundation went down to Izapa and did some digging, found some pottery and so forth. What's really interesting to me and how I really got deep into this is in 1956, I was in about the 3rd grade, and I did a paper on Quetzalcoatl. I was really interested in the Mayans for some reason. And so my paper for my 3rd grade class, the big year paper, was on Izapa. It was probably 1 page or a page and a half. And my father, he draws really well. He did a colored Quetzalcoatl for me in that paper. So that's where I got interested in Mesoamerica, was 1956. Between 1956 and 1982, the New World Archaeology Foundation spent over $12 million on their dig. They photographed, they researched. Garth Norman was in charge of the photography and doing tracings and line drawings around over the photography so that you could clearly see what was on the stela. And that was all published. And in 1982, the whole project was wrapped up and basically stopped. What's interesting to me that in 1967, somebody showed me a drawing or a photograph, as I remember, of Izapa Stella 5 stone. And I was really excited about it. So my interest from 1956 was rewarded because in 1967, I got to see a photograph of the Izapa Stella stone. But I went on to do other things in the film business. These people here are some of the scholars that have written papers and worked on Izapa. I just put that up there to give you an idea of what took place between 1938, when it was first discovered in modern times. A lot of scholars became very interested in Izapa. Now, in 1988, I met Garth Norman. That's a picture of Garth standing in front of a pillar ball. I became very interested in his work. Those incidents from 1956 and 1967 paid off because I was ready to meet Garth Norman. It warmed my heart and it piqued my imagination. And so Garth started teaching me about Izapa at that time. And in 1993, there was some new technology that came out that was called 3D modeling, and they were starting to make animated feature films using 3D animation. I told Garth we could take Izapa and create a virtual Izapa in 3D animation. The technology's there. Well, back then, just to render one frame of virtual reality or animation, which played out like a movie, sometimes took overnight. It was really clumsy technology, but it caught on in the animation business. We wrote a project proposal. It was going to cost somewhere around $3 million just to get started on it. And of course, there was nobody at that point in time that was interested in putting that kind of money into Izapa. So that project was put on hold. I went on to help start the digital media degree at Utah Valley University and changed my career from production to teaching full-time and doing some production on the side. All of this kind of played in to what was going to take place a couple of decades later. Why is it that this is so important to me personally? Why would I want to spend this kind of time and money that I've spent in over the last 30 years helping Garth and learning about Izapa and coming up with a plan to do it in virtual reality? First, Izapa was a major pilgrimage site that dates back to at least 1500 BC. That's very important in Mesoamerica. 1500 BC would be Olmec time. Izapa was a place of transition from Olmec to Maya. That is huge. What we find at Izapa, it was never built over. All other pre-classic Mayan sites have been built over. Izapa is fully, basically intact. And what we see today there, we can restore it to the way it was back, say, in its heyday somewhere around, say, we wanted to see it at 170 BC. We can restore it today to that because it was never built over. And the New World Archaeology Foundation did an incredible job. Their documentation and the topographical maps are great. The map lines up perfectly with the LiDAR that's been done. We have that data. That data is what we need to do the virtual Izapa. But to me, I love technology and making movies and all this, but I'm to the point in my life that I don't want to do something in this industry if it doesn't have something deep to say, something that's profound, something that has the ability to change people's lives. And the story of Izapa is written on the stela, and we can read the stela today. This is what I've learned about Izapa from my study with Garth Norman and others. Izapa is a sacred temple observatory, synchronized with the sun, the moon, and stars. All of these have a calendar, a sun, moon, and star calendar. These calendars are in cycles. And these stela and these calendars give instruction on the cycle of life and the path to immortality. And this is what was taught in those temples to those pre-classic Mayans. That's the foundation of Maya culture. And that culture eventually created a people of 15 million until it was finally, dispersed and fell apart back in anywhere between 600 to 900 AD, if I'm getting that right. So this is why I want to devote my time and effort to restoring Izapa so that we can teach these principles and restore them back to Mayan school children who are certainly going to be interested in this. A great thing happened in 2010. Our major split into 4 tracks. One of the tracks was animation and gaming. And so I told Garth, we can get a student of mine and we can pay him, and he will model some of the models, some of the stela at Izapa and all of the mounds. And since we have the topographical mound, we could place this over Google Earth and it would be accurate. We could make videos that will allow you to make some scholarly presentations to your peers. And so this is a little video of one of my students we hired, and here he's working on modeling Stela 89 back in 2010. This is what the model of the mounds look like, and this is looking at it basically from what it looks like in Google Earth. And so if we click on that, we can model and see the alignment between the two main mounds and Takana volcano, which is a very important alignment in Izapa. The other thing we can do is we can teach about the solar calendars. And the main calendar Izapa is the sacred 260-day gestation calendar. It begins April 30th. And what we're looking at right here is the April 30th alignment. Now, what's really neat is that I can show how the sun progresses down to winter solstice, which is the center point of that alignment at 130 days south. So that's the midpoint of the gestation period calendar, which is the center point of the gestation of a baby. Then we can watch this move back up to April 30th. Actually, this first date is August 13th. That's when the calendar starts. It goes to winter solstice and then back up to April 30th, which is the birth date. And then we can show the lineup with the stela in Plaza A there of the birth of the baby on April 30th. So this was our crude first try at the virtual Izapa. It was low polygon. It's something that you certainly wouldn't put in a major motion picture, but it's great for explaining things in archaeology presentations and so forth. The next step was Garth published his greatest work, I believe, which is Sacred Space document, the birthplace of the Mayan calendar. Izapa Sacred Space is our Bible for recreating Izapa in virtual reality and building content into that. That was 2012. The technology was still not there to be able to do this on a cost-effective manner. So the project was still kind of on hold. I then retired from Utah Valley University, moved to Texas, where my wife taught at Texas A&M. I taught a class at Texas A&M. It happened to be in music production, not film production. But while I was there, a great thing happened in our industry. And it's one of the greatest moves forward in technology in the entertainment business and in education. And it's a new virtual reality program called the Gunreal Game Engine. What we're looking at here is a frame from the Disney television show Mandalorian. Now, it looks like this character is in a science fiction movie and he's in a desert scene, and so they're on location like in Moab or someplace in southern Utah. Well, guess what? That is not southern Utah. All the background there was created in the Unreal Game Engine. The frame right below the camera is what the camera is seeing, which is a close-up of this character, and it looks like he is really in that scene. What's going on behind him is that there's something dark there. This is incredibly important because I got really excited, and I moved back from Texas to Utah. That time I went to Garth and I said, hey, Garth, we now have the technology to restore the entire temple complex in virtual reality. We got excited about it. We started researching this out. And last year, April 1st, I got 3 students who were just graduating from Utah Valley University that understood the Unreal Game Engine. And we created Plaza A. Here we go. Now we're looking at an entry point of the virtual Izapa. But guess what? Notice you've got Plaza A and Plaza B. Well, it was so successful that we decided to go on and to adding Plaza B. We hired a gaming corporation, Trapdoor Creative, and we contracted with them to do Plaza B. So let's go into Plaza B and look at virtual reality. Ladies and gentlemen, you are now standing in Plaza B. You know, who knows what it looked like? This could be, say, 400 AD after it started getting grown over a little bit. But in virtual reality, I can pan all the way around Plaza B. And you can see there's some stelas over on that side. That's the east. So we're looking north, and that's Takana volcano in the back. Now, what's really fun about this is I can say, you know, I would like to see Plaza B on April 30th. Well, this is what Plaza B looks like on April 30th in the morning. That's that date, which is the birth date in the 260-day calendar. It's also August 13th, which is the conception day in the 260-day calendar. I also can look at it on summer solstice and winter solstice and change the time of day. I think that's pretty cool because the sun, the moon, and the stars are so important to Izapa. This allows us to manipulate that and to see what it looks like. So I'm going to go over to Stela 9. There we go, Stela 9. I could zoom into it, but I don't want to zoom into it. The reason we're going to Stela 9, which this is a sun god, which is carrying a man up into the heavens. This would be somebody that's finished his cycle of life on earth and is now going back into the heavens. But I'm going to go right around and look at a pillar ball. There's 3 pillar balls in a triangle in Plaza Bay of Izapa for those of you that have been there. And I've been there, and it's quite stunning. So here's what it looks like when the sun comes up on either August 13th or April 30th. Now, this date is also called the zenith, the sun zenith. And it's one of the reasons that Izapa is located at what, 14 degrees, 14 latitude.
14.
Anyway, yeah. And because of the way the sun comes up that day, and as the sun comes up and it hits noonday, the sun's directly overhead on, that's April 30th. We were looking at it on June. Let's look at it on April. Notice as the sun comes up or goes down, there's a point in which there is no shadow on that pillar ball. That is a day of the greatest enlightenment at Izapa, where the sun sheds no shadow over that pillar ball, and the priest then would kneel on this altar and maybe do an offering or a prayer, gain guidance from the heavens, and teach people about the heavens and their reason for being here on this earth. So this is really cool that we can see the zenith sun ourselves here in virtual reality. Is there anybody here that has seen the zenith sun on a pillar ball at Izapa?
Yes, I have.
Is it stunning to you?
Yes.
Okay, now you're not the only one. Everybody here in this room has seen it in virtual reality, what you've been able to see in reality. By the way, if you were to go to Izapa today, you might not even be able to get into Plaza B on that day. So there we go. This is the zenith sun on the zenith passage, which takes place August 13th, which is the beginning of the 260-day calendar, and then April 30th, which is the end of the 260-day calendar, which signifies birth. What's interesting that here in Utah, we have Parowan Gap that's set up exactly like this, and Garth took me there on April 30th, and it's just so incredible to see the sun go down and this whole symbolism of birth at the end of this calendar take place right here about 200 miles from where I live. So there we go, April 30th. Now I'm going to click on this 260-day calendar. This is playing out in real time. This is not a movie, but it's real time with a little recording of my voice. So we're looking at the virtual Izapa with a little presentation on the 260-day calendar. The August 13th alignment with this pillar ball, Stella 9, and the sunrise marks the beginning of the sacred 260-day portion of the calendar year. It represents the beginning of a baby's gestation period in the womb. On August 13th, the sun begins a 130-day journey south to the winter solstice on December 21st, the midpoint of the baby's gestation. The sun then journeys back north 130 days to April 30th, representing birth. The next 104 days, between April 30th and August 13th, finishes the calendar year. I'm going to pause this right here because what we want to show you is that this is the baby up here. The baby's actually looking up. It's the rising Venus. Down at the bottom, we have the pregnant mother here who is awaiting birth. She's sitting up against this tree of life. And we have a couple of spirit images over to the right, which help this whole birth process take place. So this is the April 30th stela. The 260-day Mayan calendar, which began here at Izapa, is still used by many indigenous people throughout South, Central, and North America, and reflects their deep reverence for life. Our virtual Izapa is going to have 120 minutes at least worth of content like that placed inside to explain what's been discovered about the meaning of the stela and how they organically fit together and tell a story. They don't, one stela just on its own doesn't stand on its own. They were made to work together as a story as they went through this temple in some type of an order. Okay, I'd like to look at Stela 25 now and show you some of the detail that we can see on the stela. Now, this stela was recreated from Garth Norman's photographs from the New World Archaeology Foundation back in 1965. And to me, that's quite stunning that we have that much detail. I'd now like to show about a 6-minute video that tells how we're restoring these stela and how we maintain credibility with them that they're correct. Defaced, eroded, buried, decomposed, uncovered, weathered, vandalized, stolen, and recovered. It is a miracle that any of the low-relief carvings on this volcanic stone, known as Izapa Stela 5, are still visible at all. In addition to the physical deterioration, the healthy academic debate about its meaning has been silenced. Over 2,000 years since its creation, the Tree of Life stone now stands again in its original location, along with over 100 other carved stone monuments at Izapa, Mexico. They stand as a reminder of a once flourishing Mayan civilization and should be a central topic for connecting Mesoamerican cultural identity to its origins. Mesoamerican art historian Mary Ellen Miller said,
Izapa Stela 5 is the most detailed and important Tree of Life rendering in the ancient world.
Since the 1940s, illustrators, photographers, and videographers have applied their best efforts to document the carvings with clarity. The varied interpretations of what is carved stems from the difficulty of discerning what was originally there, even with modern photography. As the originally carved surface of Stela 5 fades away, archaeologists are left to debate with less and less primary evidence to support any position at all. Without a way to clarify and establish the original record, its significance is fading from memory. This has brought great confusion to scholars and Mayans alike, who are looking towards the past for answers for today's challenges. Can new technologies help reveal the weathered details from the past? Can new light be shed on Izapa Stela 5, the center of Izapa religion and the most detailed of all trees of life in the world? Normally, the further we get from the eroded past, the less we understand it. Fortunately, the development of new computer-aided imaging techniques has promoted recent re-examination of the stelae of Izapa. In the last decade, reflectance transformation imaging, or RTI, has helped to document the surface texture of many stone carvings at Izapa. RTI was developed by Cultural Heritage Imaging with input from Hewlett-Packard Laboratories. This technique uses light to map the surface of an object. It can be understood by looking at how sunlight moves across the Earth. As the sun moves through the sky, moving light and changing shadows help reveal the actual shape of the surface of the Earth. Notice how the details of the drifting sand becomes well illustrated as the sun moves in time. The detail is most dramatic when the sun is low on the horizon, causing each ripple to cast a shadow. Fortunately, the modern RTI technique can help reveal the texture of these worn stones by tracking the movement of light and shadows in a similar way. This technique combines many photos taken from a fixed camera position with different lighting angles. The result is a map of the stela's texture and the ability to see it lit from virtually any angle. It also can display the stela as if the carved surfaces were shiny. Over the last decade, Dr. Jason B. Jones and archaeologist V. Garth Norman used this technique in cooperation with the Mexican archaeology authorities, INA, to preserve a record of the most detailed and important stela at Izapa. This data preserves a record of how much detail remains on each stela against additional weathering or damage. Due to additional weathering since their discovery, it is imperative to use this latest data in context with earlier images captured when the stelae were in a less weathered condition. Comparison is revealing remarkable agreement between the RTI imaging and the photographs taken during the excavations of Izapa in the 1960s and 1970s by the New World Archaeology Foundation. This helps clarify many of the details carved into the stelae at Izapa. As we literally and figuratively shed more light onto the carvings of Izapa, this evidence provides an expanded foundation to re-examine the interpretation of the messages of Izapa with increased context. These RTI images have provided new opportunities for understanding what is recorded on the stelae of this important Olmec and early Mayan site as an additional analysis step to those already used. With this technology, we at the Ancient America Foundation have been able to recreate many of the Izapa stelae, which has resulted in additional important detail. Mesoamerican archaeologist V. Garth Norman said,
"The success of this photo project is astonishing, even revealing some new details. Almost every detail in Sterling's first 1941 photo and the 1960s New World Archaeology Foundation photos can still be seen in the properly adjusted RTI viewer image scanning of Stela 5.
RTI, along with new breakthroughs in computer modeling technology, are now enabling the restoration of the Izapa temple complex in virtual reality. This will provide greater access to Izapa for everyone from researchers to Mayan school children who want to learn about the roots of Mayan civilization and Izapa's rightful place in world history. Okay, there we go. I'd like to so I think I'll go back to Stela 25. If you punch the I button, we have a screen that comes up which has a little, written document about the stela. That comes from Garth Norman's Sacred Space. What we're doing is going through and rewriting these so that they're more user-friendly. I tell you, who is our target market? Our target market are 11-year-olds. Why 11-year-olds? 11-year-olds are the most curious people on the planet. So our goal is to take the virtual Izapa and put it in 3D goggles, the entire restored site, so a person could look at it in 3D and literally walk up to a stela and expect it close up, as well as looking at this interactive content. We have a goal of creating a museum exhibit. We'd like to start the first one in Tapachula, troubleshoot it there, use that as a proof of concept, and then move on and take it to the museum in Mexico City and the British Museum in England. After that, we would like to take a traveling exhibit with the 3D goggles and computers and projectors into every community that would invite us into, every Mayan community that would invite us into in Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and so forth. Also, we have a goal of creating a world-class game that's going to be exciting for 11-year-olds, and Bob Conder is with us on this chat. He's going to be writing this. Bob is a writer, director, producer, actor, and he'll be writing the game. And then as soon as we get the virtual Izapa finished, we will program that game. So 11-year-old boy or girl could put on a hat, that Indiana Jones hat, and come into Izapa and become an Indiana Jones.
All right, Dennis, that's really interesting. I know I consider myself a graphic artist myself, but I did do the design of Garth's Izapa Sacred Sculpture book.
Right.
My gosh, you take it with the 3D, you really take it to a whole new level.
I can zoom in on it, and I can also move around it right now and see how it fits in with the other stelas, how they're lined up. That's kind of fun. When we get it finished, though, you can put on goggles and actually walk up and walk around all the stela. We just finished this last week, what you're seeing today. And now we've got to raise probably about $500,000 to model the entire temple complex and produce content, and then probably a little more to actually program the game.
And Nicholas Helmuth, who will be our speaker in September, he has a question. Who was the first archaeologist or iconographer who recognized the Popol Vuh aspects, and at what date was Popol Vuh aspects recognized?
You know, that's really a good question. I was just reading the Popol Vuh last night. I thought, well, maybe I could start out by reading from the Popol Vuh. Cheryl, do you know the answer to that question? Who was it that tied the Popol Vuh? I just read this today.
I know that Vincent Malmstrom tied in Izapa with the 260-day cycle at the 14.8 degrees north latitude. And Michael Coe, I don't know if it was Michael Coe or one of the others that has seen the correlation with the Popol Vuh. The Popol Vuh was dictated to Spanish conquistadores near Izapa, so or just north of Izapa. So the people there had knowledge of Izapa, and the Popol Vuh ties in to the Izapa iconography.
Yeah, I was reading the Popol Vuh last night and studying this, and it amazed me how much the Popol Vuh ties into Izapa and what we're finding.
Right.
Can I make a
There's
comment?
a lot of tie-ins on a lot of the stela. Also, it's just in the Izapa is in the Pacific lowlands there, from the mountains down to the ocean, is where all of the various animals and the flora and the fauna that show up in the Popol Vuh. It really.
Wow.
Oops, Nicholas has got his finger up. What?
Well, that's just a couple things. I wrote on the Popol Vuh in my PhD dissertation. I did my research in the late 1970s, early 1980s, and I'm curious. It's been decades since I'm just curious to what degree was, for example, the bird, because that bird was usually called a macaw. It's only a macaw in Copan, Honduras. In all the other places, it is a snake-eating. It's the laughing falcon or snake-eating hawk. Two different words for the same bird. And as you pointed out correctly, Jim, all the iconography, most of the animals and birds and everything else in the Popol Vuh are all from the lowlands. So the fact that the Popol Vuh was found in the highlands, the reason is every Maya city and pre-Maya city, like San Bartolo, it has Olmec faces all over it. They all had their own Popol Vuh, which they, of course, manipulated to do what they wanted to do. So, and also I'm hearing and reading that the hero twins are being found in other cultures besides just the Maya. I don't have any citation for that, but in many, many conferences, I'm hearing that hero twins now, it's whether they're really the same hero twins or just, hero twins, that I don't know. But Michael Coe is the one who really brought the Popol Vuh back into our study, although Franz Blom, back in 1952, on the Blom plate that he published in 1952 in the Carnegie, there you have the hero twins with their blowguns. But after that 1952, the Popol Vuh was ignored until Michael Coe brought it back. And then I immediately jumped into the Popol Vuh for all the Maya iconography. It's absolutely incredible.
Nicholas, in my lecture next month, you'll be seeing the hero twins in Southwest rock art and in Southwest pottery and plates, especially among the Mimbres, where their depiction of the hero twins is almost exactly like the hero twins in the Popol Vuh. So there's no mystery about the direct influence of the hero twins from the Popol Vuh all the way up to the Southwest.
Oh, thank you. That's very helpful. Again, because you hear things, but I don't, since I'm working out in the field, I just got back from Tikal, wandering around the middle of the jungle. So I don't always have a chance to use a library.
Nicholas, what is the name of the man in 1952 who connected the Popol Vuh?
Okay, it's Franz Blom, the husband of Trudy Blom, and he found a plate in Oaxaca, in a private collection of Oaxaca, that he published. It's a round plate, classic Maya plate. And when I was doing my dissertation, I wanted to photograph that plate. Well, nobody knew where it was since 1952. I spent 4 or 5 years to find that plate, found out it was still in Oaxaca. I drove down to Oaxaca to photograph it and found out that the guy who had it 2 years before had moved to another place.
Oh,
I had
no.
to go back to the States, spend a year or so more, went back to Oaxaca, went 2 miles away from where I was the first trip, and found the Blom plate in the guy's closet. And yeah. And then so, here's this thing worth a fortune. And the guy says, Nicholas, what should I do with it? And I say, well, I mean, I'm not into buying art. So, I don't want to touch it. Donate it to INA. So I told him to donate it to INA in Chetumal. It was found when they bulldozed to make the airport at Chetumal. They bulldozed a Mayan site. And the mayor, the alcalde got all the jade, and the engineer, who was a gringo, got the plate. So he donated it to Chetumal, and I went and photographed it there again. And then it was moved to Merida Museum because it was such an incredible plate. So again, I think that's on the back cover of my coffee table book version of my dissertation. And I believe that INA itself has issued a report documenting my rediscovery of that plate. And again, the fact that, you know, I didn't want to put it in my closet because it shouldn't be in my closet. It should be available to everybody.
Hey, I see that Mary Lou Ridinger in Guatemala has unmuted herself, and she has a comment about the first person to mention the Popol Vuh imagery at Izapa. Mary Lou?
Yes, Beatriz Barba de Piña-Chan was the first person I know of in the 1960s who said that what we're looking at in the stelas at Izapa is the Popol Vuh written in stone.
Who was it, Mary Lou?
Beatriz Barba de Piña-Chan, Mexican archaeologist. In my talk on the Popol Vuh, I have a photograph of her and a photograph of Garth Norman. Both to you, saying that Garth Norman also said in the 60s that he felt that the Popol Vuh was what was this represented by the stelas.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to see you. You're only about 30 kilometers away, but I'm so busy.
No, I'm in Fort Lauderdale, Florida tonight.
Oh, okay.
Mary Lou.
I'm really close to Jim tonight.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. And Simon Martin has a good video from the pen on the Popol Vuh, and it's a lot older story than the version we get from the Quiche. I'd also like to point out, it's interesting to me that along the 14.8 north latitude, directly east is the site of Copan. And Copan is where the Quiche Maya went. It's recounted in the Quiche version of the Popol Vuh that they went to receive their right to kingship. So that particular latitude was very important, where the sun could come at zenith, and also with the 260-day distance between the two dates. See if there's any more questions. Let's see, Marilyn's asking, the teaching aspect of what you're doing is terrific. And are the stela lined up like the presentation at the site today and or at the original time of occupation?
What you saw in the virtual reality is how they're lined up today. We got this from the 60s topographical maps. We are going to go in there and double check before we release this to the public and get GPS rating,
Reading.
a GPS rating on every stela to make sure that we've got the placement correct. I don't want to be 10 feet off.
And I would imagine just with this Izapa project and, the need for more money, that it won't happen. But Joey's asking, are there plans to incorporate this technology with any other important sites in the Maya world?
Well, it could be, somebody could be doing right now. I haven't met anybody, but that would be something that I think after we perfect this with Izapa, the next site won't take as long. Because there's a learning curve to doing what we're doing. And once we get it finished, the next site that may be done, we may do another site. Somebody talked to me about maybe going up and doing something at Palenque. But let's get this done first,
Dennis, is your wife named Laurie?
My wife's name is Laurie, and I think she's watching.
And she thinks you're handsome. And Carl Calloway is asking, was corn planted, where corn is planted, so are ball courts? Smiley.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, there's a ball cart up there in Plaza F.
Right.
And I suspect there was lots of crops grown back then. You and I were talking about that yesterday or the other Saturday.
Saturday. And Maya's curious, is the bird sounds and whatnot in the back of some of your videos. She's asking, was that recorded at Izapa?
It wasn't recorded in Izapa, but what I did, I went and found birds that are found in Izapa and created, placed them in over the top of a jungle, tropical jungle that's similar to Izapa. That's something that, if I could get down there in the rainy season, it would probably be a good idea. I could go ahead and do some recording right from Izapa, but I don't have any recording. When I was down there, I do have audio from Izapa, but there were people talking loud during videotaping, and plus the birds were all scared off. There weren't, as I remember when I was down there weren't too many. I don't remember hearing any birds at all because people were running around and talking and disturbing the peace.
I didn't see Carl's initial comment before I mentioned corn is planted in the ball courts is sometimes where corn is planted. But he's saying the core Popol Vuh mythos is shared via the shared food production of maize, beans, squash, and tobacco, especially corn being the staff of life. But I'd like to add that Izapa especially is right in the hub of where they produce cacao, and even today. And in fact, when Mary Lou Ridinger and Georgianne and Garth and Cheryl and all of us took 13 Maya elders to rekindle the sacred fire at Izapa, there was cacao. We did it on some land at the end of the ball court in Group F, where the alignment with the end of the world was going to happen. But it was all cacao. And I had taken 2 of the big seed pods that I encountered walking to where we were going to have the ceremony. And I took these 2 big cacao pods and put them on the mesa, the sacred altar where everybody was putting their altars for the elders. And Tot Rigo, the main man there, came over to me and he asked me, what are these? And they, living in Momostenango there in the highlands, he even used cacao beans as the entrance to his yearly Expo Maya, but he had never seen himself. He had never been down to the lowlands and seen cacao pods. But I think that's, besides the bean, squash, maize, and tobacco, cacao was probably the main thing at Izapa.
Yes.
That's a cacao tree right behind your shoulder that we see there behind Jim's shoulder.
Oh,
Right,
yeah.
that's what I was wondering, is that the tree of life, the cacao tree? This is Mitzi.
What? That's interesting. Hadn't thought about that.
Well, it could be corn too, as a tree of life, but
Nicholas
Well,
had
the tree, to identify these trees is a real challenge. That's why we have a 5-year project in Peten, is to try to identify every flower, every tree, every insect, every beetle, every snake that's in classic Mayan art. And some of the things are very, very easy. For example, the fleur-de-lis has been identified as a Pseudobambax ellipticum by another botanist, and I accept that. We've kind of worked together on that. And also Pachita aquatica is another thing. So some flowers have been identified. The tree itself, I would say, this is trying to be polite, I would say that half the identifications of trees and plants and animals and insects in classic Mayan art are incorrect. So for example, when I look at something, I don't try to identify a hieroglyph. I'm not an epigrapher. And with all due respect to the great epigraphers, iconographers, and archaeologists, you know, that's what they're good at.
Well, and I was thinking as an artist myself that you would probably not be realistic, have a realistic tree of life. I was just making the comment about
No, there are
cacao being
trees.
a tree of life.
Okay, no, there are cacao trees in classic Mayan art, and there are cacao pods carried by monkeys. But we have found, let's put it this way, we're going to have a lot of surprises in the coming 6 to 8 months. We found an incredible number of plants out there. Not only do we go out every month for the last year after year after year, we have plant scouts. So we have Mayan people that work for us. They don't work in our office. They live out in their areas. And we tell them what we're looking for. They find it, and then we go photograph it.
Wow.
Wow. Wow.
So we have 20, no wait, I think we have 30 to 40 terabytes of photographs, digital photographs so far.
But I wonder if Mayan artists didn't abstract or make their own idea of a tree based
Yes,
on some tree
do.
they saw. That's what I'm getting at.
They do, and
I
also
mean, I'm
don't
an
forget-
artist myself, so it's how I would see it.
Yeah, don't forget, they also take different food products in every orifice of their body except the ear. So yes, they do adapt things. But the cacao trees, the cacao pods are shown relatively acceptably. And I've been able to identify a whole bunch of trees. I'm preparing a group of lectures on all the marine creatures in Mayan art, all the plants and flowers, all the insects, and all the mammals and all the birds, especially water birds. I've been working on this for about 15 or 20 years, and we're going to start publishing our stuff in the coming 8 months.
Oh, that sounds really great.
Wonderful.
Uh,
Bravo.
Maya's also pointing out, don't forget about the calabash tree. And I know that, I mean, it's not only part of the story in the Popol Vuh, but when I lived in Belize years ago, we had calabash trees on the property, and that's just like the Maya did. That's what you use. You cut it in half, and that's what I would use for my yogurt bowl. That's what I would keep seeds and stuff in it. You use calabash, the cascara, the shells for so much. They're very useful. And then don't forget about the sacred saiwa tree.
You're totally correct. Yeah. Keep in mind, there are two species of calabash trees. There's Crescentia cujete and there's Crescentia alata. Crescentia alata grows on the Costa Sur and in sort of dry areas, and Crescentia cujete natively in Petén grows only in savannas. It grows in gardens because it's brought out. But our focus of the last 3 years and the coming 3 years is on savannas, marshes, swamps, and what's edible and usable, and what's in Mayan art out in those areas and how those areas were used. And yes, there are Crescentia cujete trees in about 80 to 90% of the savannas that are in the Reserva Biosfera Maya. Our research area is 21,000 square kilometers. That's 5 billion acres. We have a permit for that entire area.
Wow.
So it keeps me busy.
Let's see, does anybody have any more questions? Well, I
Jim?
really, yeah.
Jim, it's Jimena here.
Hey.
I think he was mentioning an article from Culebro that he published a pamphlet in the 1930s. Did I hear that correctly? That
Yes.
he
Yeah.
that you said. Do you have the pamphlet? Do you have the document?
No, there's a lot of people have been looking for that document and we've never been able to find it. It's been referenced in several archaeology papers, but nobody can find it. I would love to see it.
Yeah, because I am looking at this. This is an article in Spanish for.
It would be Spanish.
Yeah, and it mentions Carlos Culebro, and from an article 1939, Chiapas Prehistórico, Su Arqueología, Folleto 1, from Chiapas. So that's the one you're talking about?
Yes, that's the one.
Okay.
Okay, that's the one.
I see. Okay.
So,
but nobody has been able to really get the actual document.
No. I believe he was from somewhere around Izapa. My thought is it could have been Tapachula, but I think he took school children out there. He was a school teacher, from my understanding. So if he was a school teacher, it could be sitting in a library somewhere.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, well, it's kind of gone silent here. Some folks are starting to drop out. And I just want to remind everybody that I will put the recording of this presentation up on the Aztlander YouTube channel. And let's go from there. All right, Dennis, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you, everyone.
And thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
All right. Y'all take care. Have a good evening. To subscribe for free to the monthly issues of the Aztlander, contact Jim Reed at mayaman@bellsouth.net. Thanks for turning out and watching Dennis's video. And Dennis, thanks for doing our Aztlander Zoom. Take care.